Godzilla, everyone's favorite atomic lizard and the star of the MonsterVerse, legendary entertainment's attempt at competing with the MCU. And while these 5 movies and 2 TV shows have been controversial among hardcore Godzilla fans, I think this universe is pretty fun and has supplied audiences with awesome big monster entertainment for the past 10 years. So I'm gonna rewatch the MonsterVerse and rank each movie and TV show on this tier list. And I'm gonna start where this universe began, Godzilla. It's the first film in this franchise and probably the most controversial. I see hordes of fans arguing about this movie all the time. The biggest issue people tend to have with it is that Godzilla only has about 11 minutes of screen time. And that's a fair complaint, but I don't mind, because while we only see him for 11 minutes, his presence is felt all over this movie. He's constantly being mentioned by these military dudes or scientists from Monarch. We see the effects of both him and the Mutos from the civilian characters' perspectives, and Alexander Desplat's score and new Godzilla theme plays throughout the movie, always reminding the audience that he's out there. But whenever Godzilla is on screen, it's a real treat. Since we mostly see him from the perspective of the human characters, he has such a large presence, and this design for Godzilla is iconic at this point. And I don't know why, but it always kind of reminded me of my cat. Do you see the resemblance? No? Just me? The Mutos are pretty cool villains. The sexual dimorphism element of their design is pretty neat, with the male being this little dude who flies and the female being this huge monster. They're both very intimidating and are genuine threats for both Godzilla and the humans to fight. I also want to talk about Gareth Edwards' directing because oh my goodness, does he do a good job. He's very good at conveying the giant scale of these monsters, but he's also great at building tension. The sequence where the Muto is born is very suspenseful. Just this huge thing coming out of the pit in the ground, who turns off all the lights and bathes the entire scene with darkness. And that's another controversial part of this movie, how dark it gets. I always see people complain about how you can't see anything, and I guess if you're more visually impaired, you might have a hard time watching this movie, and that would be a completely valid criticism. But I see everything perfectly fine, and I think the darkness works for a couple different reasons. The Mutos have an EMP ability that removes all the lights, so having that Hollywood studio nighttime lighting would take you out of the movie a little bit. And whenever there is a new light source, it makes for some gorgeous visuals that really let Gareth Edwards and the cinematographer flex their filmmaking skills, like the airport scene with the exploding jet, or the Halo jump sequence, or the atomic breath scene, which, by the way, even though this movie is 10 years old now, the atomic breath scene is still so cool. It will never not be spine tingling. This movie isn't perfect though. The middle section feels kind of poorly paced. Right after Bryan Cranston dies, it just sort of has a huge lull. But speaking of which, Bryan Cranston is awesome. Original thought, I know. He isn't in the movie that much, but he is a scene stealer. And in the beginning where we watch him watch his wife die, it's so heartbreaking. Also, side note, apparently he expressed interest in doing a Jurassic Park movie, and Gareth Edwards is directing the next one. If we make this duo happen again, that would be really awesome. The other characters are kind of lame. Ford Brody is a pretty boring soldier character, although I do like his motivations for stopping the Mutos. They took away his first family, so he's fighting really hard to make sure they can't take away his second family. But as a character, he's very dull. There are a couple moments where he can be more charismatic and personable, but most of the time he's very broody and blank-faced. And Aaron Taylor Johnson is capable of much better acting than this.
It's not important, is it? What is important are the 17 dead bodies we left getting you back from the triad that kidnapped you with the plans to ransom you, so you're extremely psychotic.
Ellen and Sam are also boring. They really have nothing to do in the movie at all and are only there to be Ford's motivation for all the crazy stuff he does. Although that's not to say Elizabeth Olsen is bad. I like her work quite a bit. Mother is mothering is what I think the kids are saying nowadays. I don't know, man, I'm getting old. I like Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins as the Monarch scientists, and he has what is easily the most memorable line from the whole movie.
Let them fight.
So yeah, Godzilla 2014 is not perfect. It has some so-so characters and some parts can drag, but overall it's a very exciting watch with tons of suspense, some fun action, stunning visuals, and a simple but satisfying story. So I'm gonna put Godzilla 2014 in B tier. Monkey time! Kong Skull Island. Now, I have to be upfront about something. I am and have always been a Kong person. Everyone either prefers Godzilla or Kong, and King Kong has been my boy ever since I was little. Back then, my grandma gave me Peter Jackson's King Kong on DVD, and I wore that disc out. I would watch that one over and over again, and I remember renting the old Kong movies from Family Video all the time, and I miss Family Video. But yeah, streaming is so cool. I love streaming, yay. And because of my King Kong preference, I tend to be more critical about movies featuring my favorite monkey, and Kong Skull Island is kinda bad. This movie has a lot of good ideas, don't get me wrong, but it fails to properly execute a lot of them. And the worst thing about it is probably the characters. There are so many different people who get stuck on this island, and I can count the number of well-written ones on one hand. Tom Hiddleston as James Conrad is a really bad lead for this movie, if you can even call him the lead. I mean, he's top billed, so I guess he's our guy. And this is barely a character. He's a very stereotypical rough and tough mercenary guy, and it did not work at all. He has no characteristics outside of that, and Tom Hiddleston is just not a good fit for this role. Brie Larson's character is just as poorly written. She's an anti-war photographer, and yep, that's her character. She doesn't like war, and she takes pictures. And she's always holding her camera to remind you of the fact that she takes pictures. Seriously, in the scene where they're all being attacked by skull crawlers, she's holding it up like it's a weapon. There's also the scientist people and the soldier people, and none of them are interesting at all. But there are 3 good characters in this movie. Bill Randa is pretty cool. I like John Goodman, and he does a good job as this sort of mad scientist character. He's only in the first half of the movie though. The only thing the film needs him to do is to get this group of people onto the island, and once that happens, oh no! I'm editing this video right now. I found out that in these few frames of John Goodman being eaten, it's just like a still image. PNG Goodman. John C. Reilly is cool too. This old grungy World War II vet who's gone just a little bit kooky. And Sam Jackson as Colonel Packard is an excellent villain, and he's easily the best written character of the whole movie. Right from his introduction, we understand what drives him. He didn't like how the Vietnam War ended, and now wants to finish this new war on his own terms. And yeah, starting a war with a giant gorilla is insane, but war does crazy things to people. And because he's played by Samuel L. Jackson, he's full of personality, and he steals every scene he's in. But more important than any other character in this movie, I think Kong is awesome, and he is a freaking menace. His introduction is one of the coldest things I have ever seen. This shot of him facing down these helicopters while being backlit, oh man, it's so cool. And the action scenes with Kong are a lot of fun. I love watching him wreck these choppers, chew on some squid, or fight the skull crawlers. Whenever he's on screen, the movie becomes quite enjoyable. But I do think the rest of Skull Island is kinda disappointing. It feels very artificial, and there are some CGI shots that look really rough, and a lot of the creature designs are whatever. These weird looking bird things are fine. This buffalo is cool, I guess. I like the scene with the spider where its legs camouflaged with the bamboo forest, but the design itself is kinda mid. And even the skull crawlers are boring. They're just weird albino snake lizard things. They're definitely on the bottom tier of MonsterVerse monster designs. These creatures have nothing on the V-Rexes from Peter Jackson's King Kong, or those weird worm things. Ugh. I should talk about that movie sometime. If you enjoyed this video so far, and if you want to see a video on that King Kong movie someday, subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. But yeah, I don't have much to say about this movie. The sacrifice scene was dumb, there's a lot of bad MCU quality humor, and somehow Brie Larson survived being held in Kong's hand and being shoved down the skullcrawler's throat. I don't know. This movie belongs in D tier. Godzilla King of the Monsters was a big surprise on this rewatch. I haven't seen this movie since it initially came out, and I weirdly remember not liking it. I don't know why, but I remember walking out of the theater and annoying my family with how much I hated this movie. But after watching it for this video, I feel completely differently. I really enjoyed King of the Monsters. First of all, I think the characters are an improvement. The Russell family is the heart of the film, and I think for the most part, they're fairly well written. They lost their son during the Godzilla and Muto fight in the first film, and we see how that impacts each of these characters. Mark becomes more isolated and left his family. Emma drowned herself in the work and became a crazy eco-terrorist. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. And Madison is caught in between her two fighting parents. This is an interesting family dynamic, and it gives Mark a good story. Throughout the movie, he's able to move past his grief by trying to save his daughter. Although Emma is a lot messier of a character. I understand that grief can make people do crazy things, but teaming up with these eco-terrorists and waking up all the Titans to kill the human race seems like a bit of a stretch. You would think, given what happened to her, she would want to kill the Titans since they're responsible for her son's death. But no, they made her a villain on par with a Pokemon evil team, like Team Aqua from Ruby and Sapphire, who wants to drown everyone and make the world one big ocean. It's that level of wackiness. And she has a big sacrifice scene at the end of the movie that feels very unearned. The only thing that changed her mind was her daughter not being okay with mass murder, which you'd think she would already know that, but whatever. Emma is not a great character and really hinders this movie, but I like Vera Farmiga quite a bit, and she does a good job with the material she's given. But blah, 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 who cares about people? What we really want to see is the monsters, and they get a ton of screen time in this movie. Whenever Mothra, Rodan, Ghidorah, or Godzilla are on screen, the King of the Monsters is a lot of fun, and the CGI is top notch. They really brought these massive creatures to life, and there are so many fun sequences with these monsters. The submarine scene with Godzilla is kinda spooky. The first fight between Ghidorah and Godzilla is cool and grand. The chase sequence with Rodan is exciting. And of course, the final battle where Godzilla and Mothra team up against Ghidorah and Rodan is epic. One of the most impressive action set pieces in this franchise. Michael Dougherty did an incredible job crafting so many fun sequences with these monsters. And as a character, I really like Godzilla in this movie. This relenting force of nature that will not stop to eliminate this alien threat. And Ghidorah is for sure the best villain in this series. The design, the power set, the sheer presence, everything about this character is terrifying, and he's the perfect choice for this film. Also, he gave us this meme, so he'll always be iconic for that. The last thing I want to highlight for this movie is the score. Bear McCreary did the music this time around, and I appreciate him using the classic Godzilla theme. You hear that low bassy sound whenever Godzilla appears, and I loved hearing those violins play when the humans charge into battle towards the end. Truly epic. So to my surprise, I'm gonna put Godzilla King of the Monsters in B tier. Godzilla vs. Kong. Yeah, I adore this movie. It really is the perfect blockbuster, and unlike the other MonsterVerse movies, this one made the smart choice of making one of the monsters the main character. That's right, the main character of this movie is Kong, my boy! Just like how Batman v Superman was pretty much just a Batman movie, Godzilla vs. Kong is pretty much just a Kong movie, and I couldn't be happier about that. We get a lot of scenes of him just vibing, whether he's scratching his butt, taking a bath, or playing with gravity. We get so much screen time with the monkey. And what surprised me the most is that he has an actual character arc. After his trip to Hollow Earth, Kong learns what his purpose is. He's the protector of the people, much like how Godzilla is the protector of the natural order. And it's really cool to see his transition from a guy who's just vibing to a dude who goes toe-to-toe with both Godzilla and Mechagodzilla. Godzilla himself is not too bad in this movie as well. He has a pretty basic story in this one. He's just fighting anyone he thinks could be a threat to the natural order, but that does allow him to go back to his roots and be a monster to the people. I'm a fire in my laser! So that's a fun change, and the title fight of this movie, Godzilla vs. Kong, is really great. Both fights are pretty fun, have good choreography, and have top-notch CGI. Although, cards on the table, I think it's kind of silly that Godzilla won the fight. He's strong, sure, but Kong is a peak specimen. He's faster, he's stronger, he can use weapons, he understands battle tactics like using cover, and he has ways of deflecting Godzilla's atomic breath. But seriously, Kong losing the fight doesn't damage his character arc, so I'm fine with it. This movie also features two sets of human characters, and this main set is really boring. I think the little girl who's Kong's friend is cool. She's an integral part to his character growth, but Scientist Lady and Skarsgård dude are lame. But thankfully they're side characters to Kong, so they don't drag down the movie at all. And this trio with Millie Bobby Brown, Brian Tyree Henry, and Julian Dennison is pretty cool. I think all these actors are really funny, and their B-plot is enjoyable to watch. And speaking of that B-plot, I think Mechagodzilla's origin is fun to unravel in this film. I think even before the movie came out, we all knew this was coming, but it was still cool. And sure, the villain responsible for its creation isn't very exciting. He's just arrogant businessman who thinks he can play God and then gets what's coming to him. But I like Mechagodzilla itself. I know a lot of people don't like its design, but I like it. And I think it's pretty cool how it moves with more stiff and robotic motions. This fight between Godzilla, Kong, and Mechagodzilla is this movie's crowning achievement. It's really cool seeing Mechagodzilla really punish Godzilla, Kong saving him at the last minute, and them teaming up to give Kong's axe the power it needs to give the final blow. Freaking awesome, man. So yeah, I love this movie, and I'm gonna put it in A tier. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even know Skull Island existed before I made this video. I don't think it had any marketing whatsoever. I do like the idea of expanding the MonsterVerse into different mediums like animation, but this just did not work for me. I'm very sad. Another King Kong project is bad. First of all, the story is kind of boring. People get stuck on Skull Island and have to survive and find their way back home. Again. There's also an element of a parent hiring mercenaries to try to find her lost kid, so in that way it's very similar to Jurassic Park 3.
Hello there.
And there's just nothing special about it. And this show has some major issues with tone. People are being eaten alive in every episode, but all the characters are cracking jokes. No one is taking things seriously, and it's very off-putting. I'd be fine with a little humor here and there, but the show is a full-on comedy. And I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but the characters are kind of boring. I don't care for Charlie or Mike or Charlie's dad. I also don't care for Irene and her band of mercenaries. I do like Annie though. Her being a little kooky and cracking jokes makes sense because she grew up in the wilderness and on these dangerous islands. And her relationship with Dog is really wholesome. Episode 6 is dedicated to them and how they met, and it's one of the 3 good episodes of the show. The other 2 are episode 7 and kinda episode 8, and this is because for the first 6 episodes Kong is barely in the show. Gee, you make a Skull Island show without the most interesting part of Skull Island and it kinda sucked. Who would have guessed? But episode 7 follows Kong and this island girl. It's all about their friendship as we follow him protecting the native people from different monsters. It's a really cool and fun episode that, spoiler alert, ends tragically. The show's big bad, this giant squid thing, kills the girl and the whole tribe, and Kong finding the aftermath is really sad. And it perfectly sets up for episode 8 where Kong fights the Kraken. The animation in the show is pretty good, so the fight itself is a lot of fun to watch. And it's a very different type of enemy for Kong. But the episode ends in the craziest way ever. Annie bonks her head, wakes up in a hospital, and that's it. There was a bunch of other characters left on that island, and we don't know what happened to any of them, and they were all left in some level of danger. I think the show thought that they were going to explain what happened in a season 2, but it's not looking like a season 2 is ever gonna happen, so I'm just gonna assume everyone else died. Womp womp. I don't have very much to say about this show. I mean, the actors do a good job. Nicholas Cantu voices Charlie, which if you like internet drama like me is kind of funny.
I'll tell you right now, your Australopithecus Cro-Magnon rock stupid.
Yeah, Skull Island is just really forgettable, so it's gonna go in D tier. Because Monarch and Godzilla x Kong are both so new, there's gonna be no spoilers from here on out. Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, the Godzilla TV show that exists because the MCU also has TV shows, but unlike those, Monarch is actually a cool little show. The big issue I've had with this universe so far is its underdeveloped characters, and for the most part, I think the characters are the best part of Monarch. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Lee Shaw is the best human character in this franchise easily. I don't know who decided to have Wyatt Russell play the young Lee and Kurt Russell play the old Lee, but I'm glad it happened because they both do such a good job. You can really believe them as the same person, just at different points in time with different life experiences. And it was really enjoyable watching Lee Shaw spend time with a young Bill Randa and Keiko and form this small little family. They're the base for the entire show, and I enjoy their parts more than the ones set in modern day. And Kurt Russell is awesome. He brings a lot of charisma and a lot of this show's emotion. He has a talk with a character in the final episode that really hits you in the feels. These two are great rocks for this series and kept me coming back more so than Godzilla. But yeah, Godzilla's here too. He's not in the show too much, but when he does appear, it's a lot of fun. And there's plenty of other titans too, like this bat or this mole. There's definitely plenty of monster action sprinkled throughout the whole series. Bill, Randa, and Kay are cool characters as well. I didn't expect John Goodman's character from Skull Island to be integral to a whole other show, but here we are. And then there's our main trio of kids who go on this worldwide journey with Lee Shaw to find Hiroshi Randa, the son of Bill and Kay. And along the way, we learn different things about Hiroshi and his family lineage. There's a bunch of twists and turns. I was invested in the story itself, but these characters are kind of lackluster. Hiroshi is fine, but he's just generally unlikable. With the way the kids talk about him and every scene we get of him, he seems like a terrible person. This is still only the first season though, so maybe whenever the second season happens, Hiroshi will change, but I don't know. Kate and Kentaro have a well-told story. They grow a closer sibling bond over the 10 episodes, but I had a hard time getting connected to either of them. And then there's May. May is a weird character. Frankly, I don't understand why she's even in this show. She's not related to the family at the center of the story, and she has little to no plot relevance at all. She gets a lot of flashbacks to expand her story, but I found it incredibly hard to care, and I was bored during the episodes that really focused on her. But I think the best part about Monarch is how it showed the devastation these monsters have on people. We go to San Francisco to see the aftermath of Godzilla's first attack. We see other countries like Japan put up Titan defenses and have safety bunkers. And most importantly, we see how these creatures affect this single family over the course of decades. I don't think Monarch is a perfect show. It definitely has its issues. It's probably 2 or 3 episodes too long, but it's a really good first attempt at the small screen. Or I guess second attempt, because Skull Island exists. We could just pretend that didn't happen. So I'm gonna put Monarch Legacy of Monsters in B tier. Godzilla x Kong The New Empire. I'm gonna be honest, this might be my favorite film in the entire MonsterVerse. I think every element came together to create an absolutely spectacular time at the movies. First of all the monster stuff is top notch. Godzilla remains an unwavering force of nature. He really isn't the focus of this film. He pretty much only exists to fight other titans, which respect. And he has his own little side quests throughout the story where we see him brawl different monsters and power up to the Barbenheimer form. And much like Godzilla vs. Kong, Kong is at the center of this film. This whole movie is about him finding this hidden civilization of apes and trying to overthrow their tyrannical ruler, who we'll talk about in a second. But you can really feel for him as he struggles to fulfill his role as the protector of the people as well as the other apes. I mean, this poor guy gets a tooth infection, he gets rocked by Scar King and Shimu, and then when he goes to Godzilla for help, he gets tackled through the pyramid. He was just really going through it in this movie. Another part of his story that I found fascinating was the fact that there would be pretty sizable chunks of the movie without any dialogue. It would just be giant monkeys communicating with each other in the ways that normal monkeys communicate.
Where's the zookeepers? Where's the zookeepers?
And I have to commend the movie for making these scenes completely understandable and some of the best parts of the film. Those 2 villains I mentioned are really well done and are villain types we haven't seen in this series yet. With the exception of Mechagodzilla, all the other villains are just animals doing animal things. The Mutos are trying to procreate, the Skullcrawler was trying to hunt and eat, and Ghidorah was trying to assert its dominance over the other titans. But Scar King and Shimu are very different villains. Shimu is a very sympathetic villain who doesn't want to be a villain. The Scar King is controlling her and forcing her to do his bidding. It was really easy to feel for her and her design is awesome. But the Scar King, man, oh man, the Scar King. I think we all underestimated what an absolute menace he would be. He isn't the strongest villain in this franchise, but what he lacks in power he makes up with sheer brutality. He is the tyrant king of these apes. He rules by fear, he kills anyone who crosses him, and he's keeping Shimu as a tool to use for his goal of taking over the surface world. And he also has a personality. With the way he moves and with his facial expressions, you can tell that he is a sinister little orangutan. I also really liked the people in this film. In my Godzilla vs. Kong ranking, I brushed off Dr. Andrews as a nothing character, but
I owe you an apology. I wasn't really familiar with your game.
she is so much better this time around. There's a strong mother-daughter relationship between her and Gia, and it's really easy to feel for her as Gia starts discovering her heritage and potentially finding a new home down in Hollow Earth. Brian Tyree Henry also returns as Bernie Hayes, and just like with Godzilla vs. Kong, I found his character to be very funny. He's very relatable, very likable, and overall makes this movie more fun. And then there's Dan Stevens as Trapper. He's an oddball character in the best way possible. The duo of him and Bernie made the human parts of the film very enjoyable to watch. But really, there's one reason why people watch this movie, and it's the same reason why people watch the entire franchise, and that's the giant monster fights. And boy oh boy, does Godzilla x Kong deliver on that front. There is so much monster action sprinkled throughout the entire film, but it peaks in the end. The final fight with Godzilla and Kong versus Scar King and Shimo is epic. It's a lot of fun, and it gave us so many memes. Goodness, is this movie just awesome? And really, this whole franchise is a lot of fun. A lot of people look down on the MonsterVerse for being silly little monster movies that maybe aren't the most thought-provoking or the most emotionally compelling, but that's not what these movies are for. And it's really unfair and disingenuous to compare these films to something like Godzilla -1. Yeah, they're both Godzilla movies, but they're trying to accomplish two completely different things. One really focused on complex character stories and the real-life ramifications of war, and the other is a sci-fi WWE match where a giant lizard suplexes a giant gorilla. Both are completely valid and deserve to exist. So with that, I'm gonna finish this tier list by putting Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire in S tier.